All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our last webinar session. We have quite a few people signed up, so we're just going to give a couple of minutes for everyone to get started. Everyone to get settled in. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and test out the chat. We have both the Q&A box and the chat features enabled for our webinar today. So if y'all want to say hi to us, let us know where you are coming from or where you're watching from today. I love this part because TASA webinars get people from all over. We never know where our audience is going to be from. So say hi, let us know who you are and where you are at today. So all right, y'all, this is why we run a test. So let's try it again. Let's see who can be the first one to get in. It should be correctly enabled now. All right, San Antonio, yay.
Michigan.
All right, Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, Mr. Pete.
It's always fun. You see your friends from far, you see different people, different states, different organizations.
Amy.
So, yeah.
I've seen a couple of Hope Store people. Hello, friends.
That's awesome. Looks like most everybody that we are expecting today looks like they're all kind of here. So we're going to go ahead and get started because I know this session has so much information that's going to get packed into it. And I want to give our speakers the most time possible. Again, my name is Crystal Garcia. For those of you who haven't seen me on a webinar before, I'm the content coordinator here at TASA. And it has been a great year of learning. So thanks for hanging out with us. This is going to be our last session for 2023. Doesn't feel like 2024 needs to be here, but it's coming. The calendar is moving forward as always. So y'all guys enjoy your holiday break. We will be back at the last of January with a whole new session. So please continue to join us. If you haven't done so, visit us at tasa.org and get on our contact us page and get on our mailing list so that you can have opportunities to keep getting registered for all of our great webinars. This session is going to be recorded for our YouTube channel. We are going to offer continuing education credit for completing the session. That is only available to those who complete with us live today. So if you're watching this recording after today's session, we hope you enjoy it. We hope you still learn something, but we can't give you a continuing education credit for that, unfortunately, this time. So those are only available for live sessions. So we do send the continuing education and follow-up information from our presenters in a exit email. So please be sure to keep watching out for that. It does come from Zoom. It comes from the Zoom feature. So sometimes it ends up in your non-focused or your junk email. So check there. If there's a problem for any reason, definitely reach out to me and I can get that or get extra copies sent out to you. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and turn this over and let y'all guys do your thing. So I'm going to shut off my camera and y'all guys enjoy your session. So.
All right. Hello, everybody. I am Christy Gunter. I am the Director of Client Services at Hope Store New Beginning Center. We have offices and shelters in Plano and Garland, Texas, which is in the DFW area. Kaira.
Hello, my name is Kaira Jallow. I am the Clinical Services Manager at Hope Store New Beginning Center. So over all things clinical, I am an LCSWS, and I look forward to this presentation today. Thank you guys for coming. You know what? I just realized. So I'm actually going to be the one that's going to be doing our body scan today. And so in preparing for this presentation, I came across a pretty cool Chinese proverb that said, tension is who you think you should be, and relaxation is who you are. And so in having that in mind, today we're going to be talking about the body. We're going to be talking about the impact that trauma has on the body, as well as some holistic approaches to help decrease some of that symptomology that comes with long-term trauma. And so in thinking about the body and getting into that spirit, I wanted us to kind of really check in with ourselves and, maybe notice where we might feel uncomfortable, notice where we may have some tension in our body. That could be a headache, that could be some lower back pain. Wanting to start at the top of our head and kind of scan through our entire body, our arms, our shoulders, our back, our hips. Sometimes a lot of people, if you're up and moving around a lot, you might carry a lot of tension there, or even sitting a lot, you might carry a lot of tension there, and down into our legs, into our feet, all the way through our toes, and just noticing anywhere that you might feel uncomfortable, not necessarily trying to change it or really do much about it, but just noticing it and being present with your body, and being able to take a deep breath in. And then as you're breathing out, imagining that tension, wherever you might feel it in your body, is leaving your body. And then just taking that observation with you as we start to learn some of these holistic approaches, and hopefully being able to apply it to yourself or to clients that you might work with. So again, thank you guys for coming. And then I'll hand it over to Christy.
Okay. You want to go ahead to the next slide?
Yep. Hit an enter, and it still doesn't want to do what I want it to do. Stay.
Is everybody seeing the bar in the middle there? Is that just my screen? Yes, everybody sees it. Uh-oh. There we go.
Yeah, do y'all have a chat box or anything open? Sometimes that'll pop it up.
Okay. Well, today we're going to talk about trauma, and especially understanding what it does and the impact to the body. And so trauma, I always joke that this book you see on the right, that this author really says everything that's on my mind and says everything exactly how I would say it. So let me go into what I say in this book. Trauma, we talk about trauma as being a closeness to death. Marie Martian Fortune says, whether or not physical violence was inflicted, the most common reaction to a victim who experienced trauma is, I thought I was going to be killed. And this is the perception of being killed, right? Or the perception of death. It doesn't mean necessarily it was going to happen, but the perception of death. And one of the things I talk about in my book is that when a person believes that it's possible, we need to believe them, because it quite possibly is possible. They know their life situation. They know how quickly the tide can turn. It's that perception that death is imminent. And that is a physical death, as in the body stops and the breathing discontinues, and also a social death, because we're social creatures and we need that connection to be able to survive. And so it's either of those kinds of perceiving of closeness to death. Kaira, you have an example for us.
Yes. And so in her book, Dr. Christy Gunter, she says that whenever a person believes that they're going to die, we should then believe them, right? And that when I read that and I saw that, something that I thought of is that trauma is in the eye of the beholder. It's something I heard a long time ago, and when I looked it up, it's by Williams and Sommer. And so when I hear the words trauma is in the eye of the beholder, to me that says that trauma happens to all of us, right? We can all be experiencing what seems to be the same trauma, but experiencing it very differently. And so we have this lovely picture of this bus on this presentation because it long ago I heard a bus story that really put this into perspective. In the story, everyone is on a bus. They're driving to wherever they need to go, to work, home, where have you. And so while they're on this bus, the people on the bus get into an accident with the car in front of them. And the people in the front of the bus were, oh my gosh, they're panicked, bleeding and having all these different experiences. And the people at the back of the bus are like, what happened? Like, right, they have no relation almost to this experience. And so they're all on this same bus, but the people in the front of the bus had this really big traumatic response, what we might deem as trauma responses, right? And the people in the back of the bus, a lot of them don't even know what's going on. And so again, when we're working with people who experience trauma, or working with our family members, friends who have experienced trauma, recognizing that their trauma is just that, theirs, right? Their experience is just that. It is their trauma. It's their trauma, it's their experience, and we should believe them, and we should work from that point of view.
So that's the first part that identifies trauma, is this perceiving of a closeness to death. There's also this being unable to cope in the moment where it's so overwhelming. Judith Herman, who's foundational to this work in trauma, says traumatic experiences overwhelm the ordinary human adaptations to life, and that they confront human beings with the extremities of helplessness and terror. Extremely important quote. So basically, that experience takes over your capacity to deal with the moment. It also is that moment where you can't run, you can't fight, you can't fawn, you can't social your way out of it. There's no action imaginable. Agency is lost. And what is agency? Agency is the ability to exert influence and choice over what happens next. In those trauma moments, agency is lost. You have no options, no choice, no action possible. This is trauma moments. You lose your ability to have any control. There's also a sense of meaning that's lost and violated. Trauma can shift that sense of meaning in the world. It can make you feel isolated, alone. You start to doubt yourself, not trust yourself and your own decisions. And often we see survivors doubting themselves and their own perceptions in the world. And that's because of these trauma moments that just change and alter the sense of meaning. It also activates this body response. And this is really what we're getting into today. Often there'll be an exaggerated response system to anything that's close to the threat. And sometimes it seems a little abnormal and weird, right? So maybe there was a traumatic experience and there was a smell of cookies. And every time you smell this normal everyday smell of cookies thing, it activates that trauma system. And so this body system is on alert, and the body holds on to this call to danger, this threat response system. So the body and brain literally change because of trauma. And this is why I assert that all violence is physical violence, whether it was just, as I hear a lot, just emotional abuse, just where they just called me names for 5 months, but it changes the body and the brain, and thus it's all physical, which is why what we're talking about today is so important. Go ahead, Kaira.
And speaking to what Christy talked about, right? Trauma is this emotional response to something terrible that happened. It could be an accident, natural disaster, or other things. And often for people who experience trauma, immediately after that event, they might be in a state of shock. They might be in a state of denial. And these are those typical responses that we often see in the clients that we work with. Those responses might look like an increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, rapid breathing. Time stops for some people, right? They might become immobile, right? And to Christy's point, losing agency and losing ability. In the short term, our body often has the ability to bounce back, right? Humans have this ability to be really resilient and have the ability to self-regulate. There are several techniques that we might use in a crisis with the client. That could be simple breathing exercises, square breathing. It could be creating some different sensations for them. It could be utilizing weighted blankets and allowing them to feel more weighted so that they're feeling more grounded. This makes me think of a client that we worked with. She came in, she was in crisis mode. An event had just happened and she just didn't know what to do. And our agency was the only agency that she could get to. And she just knew that if she could get there, then she would receive help. And so myself and one of the other clinicians that I work with, we identified that she was in crisis and we gave her ice to hold into her hand, and she was able to really focus on the sensation of the ice that the ice created for her. And in doing that was able to calm down. And in that moment, her body wasn't holding on to this long-term trauma or this experience. And so when our bodies no longer hold on to this, it's able to send messages where it needs to send, and our body is able to compartmentalize and manage that crisis. But it doesn't always happen. And so when that doesn't happen, that's when we start going into this idea of what I call like a long-term trauma response. And so that might look like chronic illness. It might look like chronic pain and autoimmune diseases. It might, for some clients, may be a stomach ache, a headache, and just this overall feeling of hopelessness. Or what, we'll talk a little bit more about kind of this dysfunction in our body and within our different systems, our nervous systems, our immune systems, our endocrine system. So again, in reflecting back to the first slide, our bodies are often altered. Our body systems are affected and can lose activity. The body holds on to danger, as Christy said earlier in the first slide. The body and the brain begins to change due to this trauma. And then often this is where our body starts to shift. I can't begin to think about the number of clients who come into our agency who experience autoimmune diseases or just talk about chronic pain. And so often, we're trying to help them manage that and to help them navigate that because it's not something that just readily goes away. So trauma often pushes our body beyond its ability to regulate. And then in doing so, this impacts our different systems as we talked about. And so we'll talk a little bit about each of the systems. I was in a training a few days ago, and by her name is Miss Ariel Schwartz. And she spoke about that some 90% of us experience trauma and then how this trauma impacts our bodies. We reflected on our own nervous systems, and she kind of asked us to think about, when we are experiencing stressors and we're experiencing traumas, do we go into sort of this hyperarousal or this hypoarousal? For some, the nervous system stays activated and sort of stays in this hypoaroused state, which we might consider like the stuck on mode, leading to experiences of anxiety, panic attacks, anger, and hyperactivity, and just an overall sense of restlessness. While for others, we sort of dip below into this window, below our window of tolerance, and we kind of get stuck in off mode. And so that might be what we consider freeze mode. It may look like symptoms of depression, might look like symptoms of fatigue, disassociation, and this overall disconnectedness, or what people might say zoning out. The long-term activation of the stress response causes too much exposure to cortisol and other stress hormones, which then can disrupt our overall body's processes. When stress is severe, our immune system often can become permanently impaired, leading to increased inflammation, and then this inflammation weakening our overall immune system, leaving us more vulnerable to the illnesses, those long-term chronic illnesses. And these can be illnesses that are both physical and mental. And, from that mental perspective, being a depression, a PTSD, and other mood disorders. And so people who have experienced long-term trauma or continue to have long-term trauma are at higher risk for having these experiences. And then as far as our endocrine system, sort of in that same light, when our hormones are increased in our body, our organs and our other bodily functions begin to decrease and diminish, and therefore our body goes into this overdrive, and it creates difficulty in healing. And so with that, I will hand it off over to Christy to talk a little bit more about that.
So the missing and important piece here is how the altered brain and this body in trauma often isn't fixed quickly. We have this destabilization in all our body systems. So the midbrain, where the amygdala is where we find the limbic system. And this is separate and apart from our active cognition. So where the more frontal lobes are, where we can make decisions, we can plan, all those kinds of things are more frontal. The limbic system, where the amygdala is searching for danger, is outside of conscious awareness. And so when the amygdala is aroused, we either fight, flight, freeze, social interact our way out, right? When that is activated, it becomes very hard to think or make decisions. It's like a big stop sign in the brain that there's a bunch of hormones that are released, and it's a stop. We don't think, we just act. Our body acts in order to survive. And this is what's supposed to happen to keep us alive. So it's unconscious. I keep saying this over and over again on purpose. It's unconscious. It's out of our awareness, which means sometimes trauma and the trauma experience is out of our awareness. So it's happening to our body outside of our awareness because it happened outside of consciousness. And so one of the things we do in therapy is try to help people understand and get that connection to happen, to begin to become aware of the pain and the suffering and what happened in trauma. For example, there was a girl I was working with, and she kept complaining about pain in her hip. And I just very nonchalantly said, "Where did he kick you?" Because she talked about him kicking her, and she talked about hip pain. And I said, where did he kick you? And all of a sudden her whole face just lit up, and she said, "In my hip." And so in those moments, we were making that awareness connection between, this is where my body is holding on, right? The body keeping the score, as we all like to say. And this is my pain. We're drawing those connections. So we need to talk about it more, because when we don't talk about it, we have all sorts of people feeling invisible and isolated. Go ahead to the next slide, Kaira. While you're doing that. So as I said before, I don't believe there's anything that's not physical violence. It's all physical because it affects the body. It affects the brain. It affects the trauma response systems. And all violence is physical. That's kind of a foundational concept for what we're talking about here. And there's an interconnectedness in all the parts of us. In my doctorate research, I really focused on body, brain, and what I called spirit in my research, but here we're going to call it being. Body, mind, and being. There's an interconnectedness of all these pieces. All these pieces are present in the trauma, although not all are aware. And thus, all of these parts need to be a part of the healing process too. Too often we talk about going to talk therapy and we want to be done in 2 sessions, right? But we need to include the body. And this is one of the things we really focus on. One of the things Kaira is amazing at is doing more than just talk therapy in our clinical sessions here at Hope Store New Beginning Center. We also talk about starting with the body. We want to talk about how healing is possible, right? Almost all of us believe healing is possible, but we don't really have a key definition for what does healing mean? And this is where I lean on Thelma Bryant Davis, and she talks about healing in terms of thriving. So whereas healing from a germ-based sickness, we might stop coughing, we might stop sneezing, there would be a cessation of symptoms. But for Bryant Davis, she talks about healing from trauma in terms of thriving in spite of. So thriving and living into in spite of the things that happen. And I really appreciate that, what she offers. So in my research, almost 10 years ago, my doctorate research, I proposed 4 different ways that we could work towards healing that start with the body beyond talk therapy. And those 4 things were art, writing, physical practices, and mindfulness. But as Kaira and I began to prep today's session about how my research applies to what we actually do here in the agency, we decided we wanted to expand it even further. We added 2 more. We added professional care and advocacy. So all 6 of these things are going to work with body, mind, and being, who we are. Go ahead, Kaira, to the next slide. So we're going to start with art. Oh no, your bar's up in front. Can't see the header. We're going to start with art and music. I promise that's what it says under that bar. Art and music. These are the things that are pre-language, before conscious awareness. So the parts of the body, the parts of the brain that are present and active in trauma, we can access those through art and music. According to Kathy Malkadoy, who is the author of the Art Therapy Sourcebook, she says, researchers have discovered that traumatic experiences often become encoded in the mind in the form of images. That is, when we experience traumatic events, our minds encode memories similar to the way that a camera takes a photograph. She argues that visual art may offer a unique way to express trauma images, bringing them to the consciousness, the frontal lobes, in a less threatening way. Art is the thing that tends to find rhythm in visual spacing. Music is the thing that finds a balance in sound and notes. And these sorts of tools can help us find ways to find meaning in the unspeakable, the things that literally don't have language, literally don't have conscious awareness. And it's a way to find our voice without words. And it's finding ourselves, it's finding meaning without using language that helps us with this trauma experience. Can you do the next slide, Kaira? Also, writing. Writing is fascinating to me. When we think thoughts, they just disappear, right? When we speak words, they just evaporate. But when we write, it's written down. We can reread it. We can process it. We can work with it. It organizes it in a logical way. They last. Writing helps us make sense of chaos and begin to integrate the experience into who we are. Instead of the narrative of trauma controlling us, writing is one of those things that helps us get control of the narrative. James Pennebaker did a ton of research in the area of writing. It's absolutely fascinating. And he says, when we're actively holding on and inhibiting our thoughts and feelings, it can be really hard work. We need to release the thoughts and feelings, and writing is a great way to do this. Pennebaker did a research study where they studied men who were laid off. And they found that in 3 months of writing, 27% of men who wrote out expressively thoughts and feelings landed jobs, compared with 5% of men who did not. And in a few more months, 53% of those who wrote out their thoughts and feelings had jobs, compared to only 18% of the men in other conditions. Those are pretty significant statistical difference. In other words, writing can be a processing tool to help us control the narrative, to make sense of the chaos, to release those thoughts and feelings, and really gain confidence. Now, Kaira will talk to us about the third thing, physical practices.
Yeah, so in in Christy's book, one of the quotes that she has in there is that often the body in motion helps the brain cognitively process information. Experts encourage any exercise that enables cortisol alertness. When our bodies are moving and active, our frontal lobes are able to process information, and cognition can get in order. I often think that physical practice is the one that people might view as the no-brainer, right? We often hear that exercise, how much it helps with mental health, physical health, right? And just our bodily functions. But for those who have feelings of hopelessness, those who have lost agency, often it's hard to get active, right? We could talk all day about why it's important, but I think that that's fairly common knowledge, right? That exercise is a helpful tool to our mental health and our long-term health experiences. But so I want to talk a little bit more about the how. How do we move from wanting the change and wanting to do these things and realizing that it's important to actually doing it. And I think one of the things that we talk a lot about with clients is starting small. That could be in the sense of time, right? Maybe I'm going to dedicate 5 minutes to a physical practice, and that could be a yoga, that could be a Zumba, that could be dance and movement. And that could be doing it from a chair or doing it from your bed, right? Wherever you can meet yourself, right? Being able to start small. And then slowly increasing that over time. And as we start to increase that, as we start to increase it, we will take things, moment by moment and day by day, and giving yourself time. And so that's sort of the how pieces, is being able to take things, starting small, starting slowly, and beginning to build, and giving yourself time. And so as far as mindfulness, something, again, that we do a lot with our clients, sorry, let me look at my name. Something that we often do with our clients is the practice of mindfulness or grounding techniques. And so that might look like the 5 senses, right? Naming 5 things that we see, naming 4 things that we hear, naming 3 things that we can taste, 2 things that we can touch, and going through that practice with ourselves and learning that for ourselves, or doing that alongside clients. Studies suggest that mindfulness practices may help people manage stress, cope better with serious illness, and reduce anxiety and depression. Meditation and mindfulness can help us to gain a sense of mental and physical activity. It can help us to gain a bit of perspective. There is a video that I wanted to play for you that talks a little bit more about mindfulness. And so let me know if you all can hear it and see it.
Training the mind is often quite different to
Are you guys able to hear it and see it? Christy?
Yes, it's still got that bar on there though, right where the words are.
How people imagine it to be. Training the mind is often quite different to how people imagine it to be. Maybe they have an idea it's about stopping thoughts or eliminating feelings, but the reality is a bit different. An easy way to think of it is to imagine yourself sitting on the side of a busy road, the passing cars representing the thoughts and the feelings. All you have to do is to sit there and watch the cars. Sounds easy, right? But what usually happens is that we feel a bit unsettled by the movement of the traffic. So we run out into the road and try and stop the cars, or maybe even chase after a few, forgetting that the idea was to just sit here. And of course, all of this running around only adds to the feeling of restlessness in the mind. So training the mind is about changing our relationship with the passing thoughts and feelings, learning how to view them with a little more perspective. And when we do this, we naturally find a place of calm. Will we sometimes forget the idea of the exercise and become distracted? Of course we will. But as soon as we remember, here we are, back on the side of the road again, just watching the traffic go by, perfectly at ease in both body and mind.
Where did I lose our presentation? Oh, there we go. Okay. And so practices such as deep breathing, mindfulness, yoga are some of the best tools that we can use and have in our holistic toolbox. Simply put, breathing has the capacity to calm our brain and regulate the nervous system. Trauma responses are connected to the brainstem, which helps us with the physiological regulation and the limbic emotional part of our brain. Mindful breathing helps connect the basic physiological process, breathing, with your prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of our brain, which helps us to integrate and shift our neurological state.
Kaira, real quick, the whole black box is over top the whole screen.
Oh, sorry. Is that any better?
You might need to close it out and restart it again. The black box is trying to learn with us. It was not invited. It's making itself known.
Is that, are you all able to see it now?
I see nothing now, just all of our little boxes.
Well, technology. Okay, how about now?
Here we go.
So often these things that we can do these on our own and build this into our regular practice. Some people may start off weekly and move into daily practices and begin to see the impact of that. We've talked a good bit about a lot of different individual practices. And so Christy's going to kind of walk us into how do we build resiliency and healing through managing our sense of community.
So we covered art and music, and then writing and mindfulness and physical practices. And now we're going to move on to two new ones that Kaira and I added. One of them is professional care. I think one thing we need to acknowledge is that we need others for our bodies to heal. Maybe the muscles are holding memories. Again, we all love the book, The Body Keeps a Score. Things refuse to let go of because this is how we survive threat later. It's important. It's normal. This is what's supposed to happen. But maybe the thread isn't there anymore. And so we're holding on to things we shouldn't. And so we need to encourage our bodies to let it go. So things like massage, maybe chiropractic care, acupuncture, acupressure, and even therapy when you're doing physical bottom up therapy versus top down therapy. And these are the things, and these are the people that we can work with to help us understand where our body is in space, and also begin to understand touch again, because often that's violated in therapy. And then the sixth thing, if you want to move to that, Kaira, we added activism. Again, Thelma Bryant Davis, I love her. She says activism is a coping
Good, how you
strategy.
doing? What's up?
Oh, sorry.
Hold on, let me put on my headset, my thing on my ear. Hey, so I have Oriana right here with me, and she says that they approved her already. Like they told her to start looking
Yeah, we have
for
somebody, can y'all?
daycares already.
Okay.
What is her next step? Do you know? Because she said that they called her, but she did not understand.
So, it's through the child care assistance?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Crystal.
Yeah.
Kyra, can you get that screen back up again?
Are you able to see?
Yay, activism. So Thelma Bryant Davis, she says activism is a coping strategy. As a coping strategy, is the use of helping others who are violated or oppressed in order to decrease the likelihood of others being violated, to gain a sense of empowerment, to counter feelings of self-doubt, and or to make sense of the trauma by finding ways of taking the negative experience and using it for the good of others who are facing similar situations. Activism can be a meaning-making activity. It's the grabbing up of that power that was taken away. It is asserting that agency again. And what is agency? The ability to exert influence and choice over what happens next. It's the grabbing up of agency and autonomy to make a difference for someone else. We thrive in spite of what happened to us by claiming back that power that was taken, by walking into that agency that we've always had and making an impact and a difference for others. What are some ways we can do this? We brainstormed a few of them. Various marches, take back the night, volunteering for causes that matter, mentoring. One of Kaira and I's hashtag hopes and dreams, as we call it here at Hope Store, is peer-to-peer. We want to start that one day. Policies, letter writing, all of these sorts of things are activism where we can take back that agency and power that might have been taken away in the traumatic experience and make a difference for somebody else.
That peer-to-peer dream is actually something that I pulled from TASA, going to a TASA conference. I was like, that is just so cool. So shout out to TASA. All right, we'll go to.
Here are some practices. We'll give you the PowerPoint at the end. I believe Crystal's going to send it out. But we gave you some links of our favorite. Yay, thank you, Crystal. Our favorite things: chair yoga, something you can literally do at your desk. Kaira found an amazing acupressure chart. We found some art experiences with some mandalas and getting into the moment, that flow. And then also a guided meditation. And Kaira and I are really big about working to see the ways that we can not just give you a bunch of information, but practice it together too. So if you would join me, let's practice some guided imagery together. Does that sound good? Somebody say yes, and I'll be really excited. Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. So we're going to practice some guided imagery together in this moment. We're all going a million miles an hour. So let's just take a moment to take a deep breath in. Close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. Focus on something in the distance if that's more comfortable. And just begin to breathe slowly and deeply. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Almost a circular breathing. In, out. Slowly let that calm go over your body. And as you breathe out, let go of any nervous tension that's in your body. With each breath, let yourself relax more and more. Let those cares and worries go with each exhale. Allow this time for yourself. Unwind. Let go of those problems. And join me on a journey to a forest. Can you picture with me? A path off in the distance. It's a wooded area. You begin to make your way towards the tall 9-foot trees. And as you walk, you notice the crunch of the leaves on the earth beneath you. You smell the green, fresh. There's crisp, cool, refreshing air. You notice the magnificence of the forest. And you seem to notice that there's a sparkle on the ground. And you look up and you see the rays of sun coming through the canopy of trees, and you feel the sun on your skin. You feel the wind move through your hair, and you inhale the goodness of the moment. You take a deep breath in, smelling the earth, the fresh leaves. And you continue on towards the shaded area. And you notice, sounds like there's water up ahead. So you walk up a hill and you notice a stream right on the side. And it's moving water. You can hear it moving over the rocks and the swish. And maybe you choose to sit down on a rock. Put your hand in the water. You can enjoy the sensation of that cold water and the support of that rock. And as you sit, take a deep breath and let the air fill your lungs. You feel supported in this quiet place that you found. Let your forehead relax and the muscles in your jaw become loose and relaxed. Your tongue rests gently at the bottom of your mouth. You can look up at the bright blue sky, see blue birds flying above. No one else is around. It's your place of quiet, your place to restore. And as you relax more and more, you start to feel more and more comfortable. And you feel your whole body begin to sink into that rock. And you notice how relaxed your body's becoming. You watch the water as it flows down the stream. You continue to take deep breaths and enjoy the view. And this wave of relaxation spreads down your neck and your shoulders, letting go of any tightness in the muscles there. You feel all the stresses and strains of the day begin to disappear. You feel relaxation in your arms all the way to your fingertips. You become aware of a growing feeling of peace inside you, a feeling of contentment, of being centered and being relaxed. You feel the muscles in your back relax, almost like a massage, all the way down your spine. Feel those muscles loosen and relax one by one, freeing them of any tension. All the way to the tips of your toes, you become relaxed. Every muscle in your legs, your ankles, your feet, all relaxed. And as you continue to feel that relaxation, you enjoy this world, this place you've created in your mind with my suggestions. And when you're ready, begin to stand up from that rock. Walk down the hill towards the pathway, the one out of the forest. But as you get ready to walk, take a few more deep breaths. Smell the pine, the fir. You enjoy this place of peace and comfort. And know you can come back to this place anytime. It's your place to be restored and refreshed. So walk down that path for now. Let go for now. And when you're ready, open your eyes and join the group again. Go ahead, Kaira.
Thank you for that, Christy. That was lovely, and I can visualize the forest. So I appreciate that imagery. So really, this is our last slide, and we just wanted to touch on the why. Something that I was thinking of as Christy spoke about activism is the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so in thinking about, mobilizing your community and creating resiliency, often that does take us out of just our individual selves and forces us to really lean on our support systems. And so increasing our support system and mobilizing our community, we want to be able to normalize people's experiences, right? That long-term trauma and chronic illness and all of these things that come along with long-term trauma doesn't just heal overnight. And that it does take a lot of the different practices that we spoke about, the art, the writing, the physical practices, to start to decrease some of that symptomology. And that first step forward is creating the normalization of it, but also creating awareness for it. And when we increase awareness, we're able to decrease shame. Brene Brown says that if we can share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. And I would venture to say that if shame cannot survive, then that leaves space for healing. We want to be able to normalize these traumatic experiences and responses for ourselves and for one another. We all go through trauma, and through this trauma, our bodies have the ability to break down. But in talking about that, the beauty of the human body is that we also have an unbelievable amount of resiliency. I think the bottom line in talking about trauma, the body, and the different holistic approaches towards healing is to be able to reframe and to shift perspective into one of hope, to this idea that it can be done. While holistic approaches may not always create a full 360 in our health and completely eliminate all this chronic pain or illness, studies have certainly shown that these approaches can sorely reduce symptomology and or severity of symptoms, as well as increase the time between flare-ups. This decrease in severity and symptomology can lead to a decrease in time and money spent on medicine and medical interventions, and then in turn, decreasing the weight that trauma and its impact has on the individual, on their family and their community, as well as the medical system and the greater community. For example, the use of support dogs may improve functioning and reduce disability for enabling someone with a traumatic stress to enjoy greater societal participation, even if the symptoms aren't completely gone, right? And so they're utilizing their dog or their animal therapy, and in doing so, they're able to increase their participation in the in the greater community, and thus eliminating and decreasing some of the symptomologies that they're experiencing. So again, the why is being able to normalize and increase awareness, increase resiliency for individuals, and just reframe the way we all look at trauma, the body, and the approaches that we use to heal them. Thank you.
And so we've left a lot of time for community talk and questions. We want to open up the floor. We gave some information. We practiced some guided meditation. We explained why this is so important to us at what we do at Hope Story and Beginning Center. Now we want to hear from you. Were there any questions we missed while we were talking, Crystal?
Pushing too many buttons at the same time. I didn't see anything, but tis the season. I didn't see any questions, but I got a lot of positive feedback just on how powerful this was, and the yoga chair idea, just great stuff going on. So I did want to let everybody know we have enabled mics. Cameras are still going to stay off, but if you want to chat with our speakers today, please feel free to do so. And I will also be popping in with any questions you might type in the chat box or the Q&A.
I really enjoyed the guided image. Can you hear me? This is Deborah.
Yes, go ahead, Deborah.
So I don't know if there's a way to get a copy of something like that we could use, but I think that was really nice.
What, the guided imagery?
Yes.
Sure. The one that we posted, or that is in the link in the PowerPoint, I borrowed from that, and then I borrowed from another, and I kind of weave them together to make my own. So,
Okay.
But I have it written down, so I can include that in an attachment I give to Crystal.
Wonderful. So great presentation. I loved it. My other question, I saw someone said something about CEUs, download the CEU certificate. Is that?
Yeah, I attached the wrong file, so I will fix that in just a second. If y'all will just give me a second. And I think
no
Ashley
worries.
is next in line for her question. So
Hi there. Sorry, I was trying to type it and it just quite wasn't working. But yeah, I have a question about, I guess, how do you navigate when you have a sense of guilt for your trauma in a sense? So, oh, because I wasn't, you know, an example. So like if I wasn't like sexually abused or like physically abused or, mentally abused, like, oh, maybe my trauma isn't as significant as a trauma that someone else has experienced in this capacity. I think, how do you navigate like those senses of guilt or, other feelings of like that? Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm going to answer it one way, and I bet you Kaira has another way to answer it. We've worked together for 2 years now, so I have an idea of what you'll say. But I want to say that, so my doctorate research, I did part of it in Liberia, Africa. And one of my classmates talked about how she didn't have her wedding band anymore because it was stolen by the rebel army. They lost her house. She lost family members, all sorts of horrible stuff. And I said, oh my goodness, compared to that, my trauma is nothing. And she said something I will never forget. She said, all trauma is trauma. Your trauma is just as bad as mine. My trauma is just as bad as yours. And so that's how I would answer it, but I'm going to let Kaira take over because I think she also has something really amazing to say.
Yeah, so I think this takes me back to that first slide that we talked about, that trauma is in the eye of the beholder, right? We all experience trauma. We all experience trauma in our own ways. Something that I might view as traumatic for me, you might say, hey, it, let it roll off my shoulders. It didn't impact me, right? And so I get several clients who have that sort of feeling of, oh, how can I feel this way when people over in Gaza are going through everything that they're going through right now? And, you know, I say that is their trauma, and those things are horrific to that they're experiencing, but so is your domestic violence. Going home to someone who mentally and physically abuses you every day is also has this horrific, you know, is also horrific. And so not comparing the two, I really encourage clients to not compare the two, but to truly view them as two isolated experiences that that person is going through and that you're going through, and always leave space for yourself, because you matter, you know. So
The one other thing I would add to that also is sometimes I think those feelings of guilt are an attempt to grab control over the situation that's uncontrollable. And I don't want to take that away from a survivor. So if I can control it, I could have changed it, right? And so you feel guilty about changing it because you so desperately wanted to be able to change it, right? And so when I work with people who have that feeling of guilt, I don't just say, oh, you shouldn't be guilty, right? No, it's a natural desire to want to feel guilty, to feel shame, to feel those kinds of things because we so desperately wanted our agency and autonomy in those situations.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thank you.
So I do have a question for y'all. It's in terms of measuring progress, because we know the brain is, and I love the brain and how it heals, and just talking about neuroplasticity and that healing at that deep cellular level, but it happens so slowly. So do y'all have any tips or advice on how we can measure progress? Because, you know, sometimes we'll all like, we want to skip all the way to perfection, and it might just be one or two changes in patterns that you might not even notice. So what are some things we can do to measure progress?
yeah, so in doing this research in preparation for this presentation, one of the things that I think I came across, and I think I spoke to it a little bit in the physical practice, is just that ability to decrease, like maybe or increase time between flare-ups. So say, for example, if you are a person who experiences an autoimmune disease, or you might, you know, have a flare-up today, but because you may be practicing some of these holistic practices, you may not have another flare up. For some people have been, you know, 3 months, 6 months, a year out, when they were maybe having more regular flare-ups before. So I think one of the ways to notice change or healing is maybe time between flare-up, severity of symptomology, right? You know, maybe when you have your first, I keep saying flare up because I just keep thinking of like autoimmune diseases. But you know, if you have a flare up, you know, you might experience all the different symptoms that come with that particular autoimmune disease. But maybe the next flare up, there's less symptomology, right? You know, you might have only now 4 out of the 10, when before you had 10 out of 10 of the symptoms that come with it. And so I think paying attention to those pieces, like, okay, it's still happening and it's still here, but it's less severe, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have anything.
And I think there's other ways to see it too. I took less responsibility for what I couldn't control today. I helped make a difference for someone else. You know, there's all sorts of little markers. And I think part of the reason that this is so important is because it's so invisible. And there's no way to say, grab onto it and say, I can see that there's not a bruise on my hand anymore, right? It's more invisible. And so seeing the decrease of symptoms, like Kaira was saying, seeing how we're changing. And of course, we love evidence-based practices that have beautiful graphs and charts, that too. Does that answer your question, Crystal? What other questions do people have? We left plenty of time and space for you.
I see Mr. Pete has a question in the Q&A. He says, his question is, how would he be able to know or tell if what, I'm going to just read it as it says. My question is, how would I be able to know or tell if I need something more than what I'm currently doing? I do think I am having issues, but how would you know?
I'm sorry, I forgot I could unmute myself. So
Oh,
I
no.
don't think that I'm having issues. But like,
Okay.
I know. Yeah.
So are you wanting to know if you need something more than what you're currently doing? Or maybe you can add to it.
So if you're talking about like anxiety and some stuff that is unconscious, how would you be able to tell if you don't feel like you're overly anxious? I don't have any autoimmune issues or any of that kind of stuff. Normally, I think I'm pretty healthy, at least based on what my doctor says. So how would I know if it's an unconscious process, if something's actually going on underneath that I don't realize? That better phrased, I guess.
Yeah, so it makes me think about like sometimes, so I guess I can even reflect on my own because I'm a person who does experience a lot of anxiety. But a lot of the time my anxiety presents in different ways. And I think in working with clients, with a variety of clients, I think everyone sort of presents in different ways when it comes to things like anxiety, depression. And so some people, that response might look like anger, that response might look like retreating and becoming like losing agency and mobility and those sorts of things. And so I think if you start to see maybe those around you, sometimes it's those people around you who are better able to say, hey, you're shifting, or your mood is different than what it typically is. And I think that, so one, leaning on community and people around you, if people around you are maybe pointing out different aspects, but then also knowing maybe a bit about yourself of like, man, I used to really like to spend time with my family every single weekend, but I've been doing less of that. I'm usually really excited about getting up and going to work in the morning, and now I'm no longer excited about that, right? If you start to see, I think, shifts in personality and mood, that might be an indicator of something internal going on. So I don't know, Christy, if you have something to add to that.
And then the reverse would be, if as you see healing happening, it would be, I feel more excited about getting up in the morning and hanging out with my family, and I'm starting to return back to who I want to be. That's a good question, Mr. Pete.
I think kind of like piggybacking off of that and kind of what you both said, like, do you have any advice, or what type of like self-check items or things can you ask? Like, what kind of questions do we need to be asking ourselves to determine if there's a change? Because I think it's so easy to get caught up in your day to day that, we're not recognizing that we're changing, until it's like too late, or hey, or do you have any advice as in like, hey, every couple months, or like, hey, every week or so, check in with yourself. Like, what kind of things can I ask myself? Or if you're talking to a client, like, what can I ask my client to do? To kind of determine like, hey, something might just not be right,
I think this is where community comes in really important, because sometimes we're not aware. Again, the trauma happens outside of our awareness. And so sometimes a lot of this happens outside of awareness. And so having a therapist, having community around you, having a supervisor and a relationship that allows for tackling those barriers together and really seeing who we are and who we want to be and where we're going, those kinds of things. I think that's really important. I'm noticing this. You're a space for your friends, family, community, therapist to say, I'm noticing this. Have you noticed it? Anything you'd add, Kaira?
Yeah, and so definitely community. I am huge on community and support systems and leaning into that. but also, I guess, I know that in trauma, right? And 'cause a lot of our clients will come and say, I have nobody, I had a traumatic childhood. I have difficulty creating relationships. And so it really sometimes is just them. And so just, that I love a good body scan. That's why we started the presentation with a body scan, right? I think being able to get into regular practice of doing those things and checking in, where do you feel tension in the body? Do you tend to feel more stressed, you know, after work or getting up in the morning, right? And some people are really good at journaling. And so I say maybe journaling different experiences every day and going back and sometimes and looking through some of that and seeing if there's change over time. um I think being intentional is going to be really important. And I think if we can be intentional about, hey, I do want to always be aware of myself, right? Because we go to doctors regularly, right? A lot of people have their yearly physical to keep us on top of the things that are going on within our body. And I think we have to do the same from a mental health perspective of being diligent about, okay, I'm setting this appointment for myself every single week just to check in. I think that could go a long way just as an individual, but definitely mobilizing community for sure.
And I would add, this is a really great time of year to set a goal like that for your New Year's Eve resolution. Just saying.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I feel like now I previously worked at Atlanta Regional Commission, and I would get people to call in, and like my clients, they don't have anyone, or they're looking for services from this organization or whatever program, but to get down to like the bare bones, they don't have a sense of community. And so I think everywhere I go, whether it's like someone I just met on the street or like new coworkers, I'm like, hey, meet people, kind of like as you're going through life, like meet people, take people with you in from this time. And from when you're growing up, it kills me when I hear people say, it's like, oh, I don't talk to any of my high school friends or people I went to college with. I was like, no, that was like a perfect chance to build and start building that community. But I mean, it's never too late. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely never too late to build community. I am very pro. I'm like, oh, have you tried looking into the Meetup app? What are you interested in? I'm always asking clients, what are you interested in? Do you like taking pictures or do you like painting? There's probably a group for that. There's
Yeah.
probably, and I think being able to normalize that not everybody has to be your best friend, and sometimes just having people and around you that you see regularly, that could just even be people at work, you know. I think that that's important, and that also is community too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Right. So we do have a question from Zach in the chat box. What effective ways that you all have seen are the most useful or effective to address and handle triggers from trauma?
Kaira, I know you have some good answers for that.
So this one, I keep reflecting on just conversations and things that I have with clients. And for this one, ideally, in an ideal world, I think having some level of awareness of what your triggers are. But I know that that doesn't always happen. I think a lot of the time we don't realize something is a trigger until after it happens. And so, kind of going back to the slide that we talked about, maybe like some of that crisis work, being able to like do once you realize that, like when a trigger happens, you're probably going to go into like a state of, rapid heart, rate, maybe faster breathing. And so that's when we want to, kind of dig into that toolbox of like the deep breathing. The grounding techniques can work wonders. I am a huge fan of grounding techniques. I think everybody should have a weighted blanket just sitting around their house. I encourage that because that can be really grounding for a lot of people. And so I think, when you're in the moment, you have your trigger and you're anxious and all of those things, practicing deep breathing, practicing the grounding techniques, throwing on a weighted blanket on yourself. But then in the aftermath of that, I think journaling could be a really good one in this case too, of like writing down what your triggers are and being allowing yourself to be aware of those triggers so that when and if they come up again, and often they do, then you're kind of already maybe more readily prepared. I hope that answers the question.
I love that. That was a great answer, Kaira. What other questions do we have?
Looks like the chat box is quiet. Our Q&A is quiet. So thanks again. This was such a great webinar. I think we had a little visit from the Elf on the Shelf with their little holiday mischief with the technology. But thanks you again, y'all, for hanging in there with us. You want to go ahead and wrap up. Looks like just based on reading the chat that a lot of us have security features, so it's probably not going to be feasible for us to re-download a new copy of the continuing education certificate. So what I'm going to do is I will email you all directly. I'll email all of our participants today directly a copy of the continuing education certificate that you can download from me. We do have quite a few people on the call, so this email will be going out to quite a long list of people. So if you have extra security features on your servers, make sure my email address, cgarcia@tasa.org, might be on your safe list, so that gets through, and we will just problem solve it from there. Definitely not a problem. So we're used to working with lots of security features, so we have backups. And one more thing, just to remind y'all, at the end, when you close this out, there will be an exit evaluation survey. If you could take a few seconds to fill that out, that way we can record this and we can give our presenters feedback. We would greatly appreciate it. And once again, this is our last webinar for 2023, and we will be on a break for a little bit. We will be back at the end of the January with something new for 2024. And thank you all. Again, I always see names of people that come to TASA webinars regularly throughout the year. So really, really appreciate all of our new people and all of our past presenters and attendees. So y'all make this time fun. Even when the technology glitches on us, we figure it out. So all right, y'all, have a great afternoon. Get some holiday rest, and we will see you back in January.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays.